And right now, the president attending a luncheon hosted by the Secretary General of the United Nations. As that happens, we'll dip into it. But right now, we want to talk about the world reacting to President Trump's tough rhetoric on North Korea earlier. In his first UN address, the president issuing sharp warnings to the rogue nation, urging world leaders to turn up the pressure on dictator Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear program. Listen.
No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Let's bring in Leslie Marshall, Fox News contributor and syndicated radio host, and Patrick Griffin, former media consultant to 4 Republican presidential campaigns. Thank you both for joining us. Patrick, I'll start with you. The president wasted no time laying down his tough talk for North Korea in the way that President Trump does, using words that maybe not every president would use, but certainly getting a message across and to his audience today at the UN that, you know, the U.S. is prepared to annihilate North Korea, proving once again he means business when it comes to shutting down Pyongyang's defiance. What did you think of his speech?
Well, Julie, there was nothing subtle or ambiguous in this speech. This was a mix of pure Trumpian populism and something I like to call optimistic realism. Look, neither of those things are seen very often at the United Nations, and they got a good taste of both today. I think the president proved today that he can hit the right tones, understanding both the seriousness and the threat, not only to the United States, but also to civilized nations around the world of behavior like rogue nations like North Korea. The bottom line in this is there is no question as to where President Trump stands today. I think he showed the artful ability to deploy both strength and nuanced power, which was exactly the right tone to hit in front of the General Assembly today.
Leslie, a rocket man on a suicide mission, not only for himself, but for his regime. Those were his words. How do you think world leaders perceived the president's rhetoric today?
A juvenile. I think calling terrorists losers, and I think that calling another leader, as much as you despise them, rocket man, just look at the stone-faced diplomats that he was facing. This is not a rally. This is not his base. And I think in the beginning you even saw a bit of discomfort with the president, who fortunately did not go off script and embarrass us. I would have to say that I agree with Senator Feinstein, who said that the UN stage is not a place to threaten to wage war. We know the United States means business. North Korea does. The world does. The president is echoing the sentiments of Nikki Haley. However, at the end of the day, he is, in a sense, insulting some of those in the audience when it comes to North Korea, America first, almost talking as if we're isolationist and forgetting there are people in that room, whether it's the Iran deal or climate change, that are our allies in some of these agreements, certainly with Iran. But North Korea threatening somebody that's as unstable as the leader of North Korea with Rocket Man, or calling terrorists losers, both very unstable, violent individuals, I think can be very dangerous, and that is not the stage, the place to do it.
Leslie, what say you, let's say he meant those words for Russia and China, because clearly they are listening and they are watching this administration very closely, and clearly that was a warning for them. And you can't play nice with this monster. I mean, he tortures his own people. God only knows what he would want to do to the rest of the world. And given that Kim Jong-un just recently threatened that he could actually reach the U.S. territory of Guam with his repeated missile launches, and this threat is so real, how else would you like him to see, to see him address the nation and address the world leaders in how we deal with somebody who's posing a direct threat? Because diplomacy, unfortunately, doesn't work with this guy.
Well, you know, one of the things that I hate to say that I agree with Steve Bannon on anything, but I do agree that, you know, this is a problem that has not been able to be solved, and the kind of threats that the president is talking about is not going to solve it. You know, we can discuss Guam, but the reality is the people that would suffer the most with any type of a conflict or violence with North Korea that we would be a part of would be South Korea, a key ally also sitting there in that assembly. So I think, you know, harsh watchwords are good if it's just you against the world, but it's not just the United States with North Korea against the world. We need the world on our side, and I think he spoke a bit too brash and made us sound too isolationist. Of course, the United States should be first, as he said, but the United States is not the only country that would be affected, obviously, by North Korea. The South Koreans would be affected mostly and have the most to lose and the most danger in their path.
Right now, we're watching the United Nations as the president is walking into a luncheon, which will be hosted by the Secretary General of the United States, and we'll continue to watch that. Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, also expected to attend. Patrick, while we watch this developing live, you know, the president's tough warnings inevitably will be, because Kim Jong-un will probably actually be empowered by his tough message and go ahead and launch more missiles anyway. But in his speech, he does praise Russia and China for signing onto that recent tough UN resolution recently, says that more needs to be done. What do you think China and Russia took away from the president's speech today? And by the way, there you go. President Trump is entering the room now. So as you talk, and we have Nikki Haley following right behind him, which, by the way, you know, Leslie had just mentioned that this isn't war rhetoric. You don't normally hear warmongering being spoken at the United Nations. That is true. This is a place of diplomacy. But Nikki Haley herself, a UN ambassador, has basically said that war is not off the table, and that a military strategy is in the works if Pyongyang continues to defy the rest of the world. Patrick, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Well, I think that if you looked at the poker faces in that room today on the cutaways during the president's speech, they weren't very good poker faces. In fact, Leslie is right. Some of those countries did not like what they heard coming from the president, and that was by design. Look, if we're going to go back to the wobbly sort of gobbledygook of globalism that we were faced with in the last administration, look where that has gotten us. And I agree, the United Nations is supposed to be a place for diplomacy. We have tried diplomacy again and again and again. And as Ambassador Haley said, we're kind of out of options on the diplomatic front. There are no good solutions here. One thing the president did was try to be Donald Trump, who he is. And by the way, Democrats continue to be aghast by Trump. They can't imagine his rhetoric. But the bottom line is that's who he is. And that was combined, I think, with a firm and clear indication that the United States will not be put in a position where its people or its allies or civilized nations of the world will be endangered by people like Kim Jong-un. I think that's very, very important. Kim Jong-il is a bad guy, and it's very much time that the president was both firm and resolved about letting him know that we're not going to take this stuff. It's very important.
Leslie, it's interesting that on the very first time the president addresses the United Nations General Assembly, we get word that the United States, according to General Mattis, is actually considering taking preemptive strikes in order to defend us and defend us from North Korea and their constant missile launches. In other words, shooting these missiles using our THAAD system, the missile defense system, and shooting these missiles each time they go to try to shoot one in the air, whether it's directed at the U.S., whether it's directed at South Korea, Japan, it doesn't matter. The fact is every time he shoots off a missile, he's showing the rest of the world, I'm going to continue to do this, and I'm eventually going to get a nuclear warhead on one of these things, and don't you try to stop me, because San Francisco, you're next. I mean, this is the type of talk that needs to happen from the White House, and clearly the past administration did not lay down the line. That's why we're still in this mess. Leslie, I'll let you take it.
First of all,
I want to go to Leslie.
First of all, talking and threatening, I just do not feel, they're going to help when you're going to have some measure of diplomacy. I mean, we are not going to wipe North Korea and all of those innocent men, women, and children who are brainwashed by this leader, quite frankly, and don't know what's going on with the outside world, and don't know how wonderful the United States is and some of our other allies worldwide. This is only, I think, Julie, you had mentioned earlier that, this could just provoke the type of individual that Kim Jong-un is. And that is definitely a concern. I think not just for, the people of South Korea, the people of Guam, San Francisco, but even the people of North Korea, who will be sent by this madman as lemmings to their death like I said, brainwashed and not even knowing the cause and the effect of what will happen with such. This is not an individual, to me, that you provoke. And I think that the words were very provocative that the president had today. Also, I'm very surprised when you hear leaders. Mattis himself has said in the past that, you know, war with North Korea, not a good idea. And sure, 100% diplomacy isn't going to work, but there has middle ground, and administrations, both left and right. As a matter of fact, the past 4 presidencies have not been able to find that balance to be able to tame the beast, because this guy is much like his father, and it just continues on in that lineage.
It's unfortunate, and nobody, first of all, nobody, let's be clear here, nobody certainly would want to see a repeat of the Korean War. And I think the idea, of course, is diplomacy. But Patrick, I mean, President Trump's threat to, quote, totally destroy North Korea, that's extraordinary, even coming from President Trump.
It is. That's very, very tough language, very tough talk. But I think that one of the things that's important here is that the president has to project that the United States realizes how high these stakes are, and that the United States of America must be in a position, if it is pushed to do so, to either respond or be prepared and let them know that we are ready to do this. We can't continue to draw red lines, as the previous administration did, and then walk away.
Okay, Patrick Griffin, Leslie Marshall, thank you both. We appreciate it.